Abraham Lincoln came into the world on a dirt floor. No silver spoon, no fancy name, just a log cabin in the backwoods of Kentucky in 1809. He was born to a poor frontier family. No privilege, no power, only hard work, deep silence, and long shadows. His mother died when he was 9. His father remarried, but young Abe remained quiet, withdrawn, and often alone. He had less than a year of formal schooling in his entire life. But what he lacked in education, he made up for with something even rarer, a hunger to understand the world. Books became his escape. He would walk miles just to borrow one. He read the Bible, Shakespeare, Aesop's fables, and law books by candlelight. And when he wasn't reading, he was listening, really listening, to the way people talked, how they argued, what they feared. By the time he was a young man splitting rails and working on riverboats, Lincoln wasn't just learning to speak, he was learning how to reach people, not with fire, but with clarity, with care, with truth. He had no money, no connections. But what he had was something stronger, a deep, still sense that he was here to serve something greater than himself. Lincoln rose slowly, painfully, through the ranks of American politics, first as a state legislator, then a lawyer, then a congressman. But by the time he ran for president in 1860, the country was already splitting in two. When he won, the South seceded. Before he even took office, the Union had begun to unravel. And suddenly a man who had known only hardship, who had never seen a battlefield, who still carried sorrow in his eyes, was asked to hold a broken nation together. The Civil War began in 1861. For 4 years, Lincoln bore the unbearable. More than 600,000 American lives lost, constant criticism, crippling depression. He wrote his speeches and letters deep into the night, often alone, fighting not just a war, but his own despair. He wasn't a fiery speaker like others of his time. He didn't give grand, boastful speeches, but when he spoke, he pierced the soul. A house divided against itself cannot stand. With malice toward none, with charity for all. He guided the North not with bravado, but with vision, and with an unshakable belief that America could be redeemed. In 1863, amid the horror of war, he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring freedom for slaves in the Confederacy. It was a political gamble, a moral thunderclap, and a turning point. That same year, he stood on a blood-soaked field in Gettysburg and delivered a speech just over 2 minutes long. It remains one of the most powerful ever spoken. In 1865, Lincoln was re-elected. The war was nearly over. The Union had survived. Slavery was crumbling. And for the first time in years, there was hope. But just days after the Confederate surrender, Abraham Lincoln was shot in the head while attending a play at Ford's Theatre. He died the next morning, April 15th, 1865. A nation wept. Even those who had once called him a tyrant lined the streets in mourning. His body was carried through 180 cities on a funeral train that traveled 1,600 miles. People stood in silence for hours just to see the coffin pass. Because they knew. This man had carried the soul of a broken country on his shoulders and asked for nothing in return. Greatness is never an accident. It's carved from pain, patience, and purpose. And before diving into policy or leadership, Lincoln practiced something far more powerful. 1. Relentless self-education. Lincoln never stopped learning. From backwoods law books to the classics of Western thought, he devoured knowledge like a man starving. Even as president, he carried Shakespeare with him, often reciting lines aloud to think through decisions. 2. Deep listening and reflection. He wasn't known for speaking quickly, but when he spoke, it mattered. Lincoln listened more than he spoke. He asked questions, he rewrote speeches dozens of times, and he carried other people's pain in his voice. 3. moral clarity under pressure. Lincoln believed deeply in right and wrong, even when it cost him politically. He once said, "I'm not bound to win, but I'm bound to be true." That compass never wavered, not during war, not during loss, not even under threat of death. What made Lincoln different wasn't brilliance or charisma, it was grace under unbearable weight. Friends described his eyes as distant, sorrowful, but his sorrow wasn't weakness, it was empathy. He felt what others felt. He carried not just the title of president, but the grief of mothers, the burden of soldiers, the dreams of slaves. That quiet strength, that emotional intelligence, is what turned a poor boy from the frontier into a moral force history would never forget. Abraham Lincoln didn't just save the Union, he saved its soul. He reminded a broken nation that compassion was not weakness, that unity was still possible, and that leadership meant sacrifice, not power. His story is not one of perfection. It's one of perseverance, and that's what makes it universal. Because Lincoln teaches us that even in the darkest moments, a single steady light can guide millions home.